At 0615 on December 27th, 1944, Major Richard Bong stepped onto the pierced steel planking of Tacloban Airfield, Leyte Island, Philippines. The humid tropical air hit him like a wall. 24 years old, 40 confirmed kills, the highest-scoring American fighter ace in history. He watched ground crews swarming over P-38 Lightnings in the pre-dawn darkness, preparing for another day of combat operations against the Japanese. Bong had been in the Pacific for 2 years. 2 years of dogfights, strafing runs, escort missions, and death. He had seen friends disappear into clouds and never come back. He had watched Zeros explode in midair, Japanese pilots burning alive in their cockpits. He had killed more enemy airmen than any other American pilot, living or dead. The number followed him everywhere. 40. Captain Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 kills had stood for 26 years. Bong had broken it in April. Now he had 40 confirmed victories, 14 more than Rickenbacker, and the war wasn't over yet. General Douglas MacArthur himself had pinned the Medal of Honor on Bong's chest 3 weeks earlier at Tacloban. The ceremony had been brief, almost casual by MacArthur's standards. The general spoke about courage, about duty, about the American fighting spirit. Bong stood at attention and tried not to think about the men he had killed to earn that ribbon around his neck. He wasn't supposed to be flying combat missions anymore. Not officially. General George Kenney, commander of the Far East Air Forces, had ordered him home twice already. Bong was too valuable to lose. His face had been on the cover of Time magazine. Newspapers across America printed stories about the farm boy from Wisconsin who had become the nation's greatest fighter ace. Losing him would be a propaganda disaster. But Bong kept finding ways to stay. Advanced gunnery instructor, combat tactics advisor, test pilot for new equipment, any excuse to climb into a P-38 and hunt Japanese aircraft over the Philippine skies. This morning was supposed to be a training flight. New pilots from the 49th Fighter Group needed orientation on the Leyte area. Bong would lead 4 aircraft on a familiarization mission. No combat expected. The Japanese air forces on Luzon had been badly mauled in the October battles. Enemy aircraft sightings were down 60% from the previous month. Bong walked to his P-38 Leaders 5LO, serial number 44-2-5327. The twin-engine fighter sat on its tricycle landing gear like a predator waiting to strike. 2 Allison V, 1,000, 710 engines, 1,475 horsepower each, 4 50 caliber machine guns, and 1 20mm Hispano cannon concentrated in the nose. The most heavily armed fighter in the American arsenal and the longest ranged, a P-38 could fly 1,300 miles on internal fuel, twice the range of a Hellcat or Corsair. His crew chief, Sergeant Robert Strand, was waiting beside the aircraft. Strand had been maintaining Bong's Lightnings for 18 months, through 3 different aircraft. The first had been shot up over Rabaul. The second had suffered engine failure over New Guinea. This was the third, and Strand had kept it flying through 6 months of continuous operations. "She's ready, Major," Strand said. "Both engines checked out perfect. Guns are loaded and charged. Full internal fuel." Bong nodded and began his walk-around inspection. Force of habit. He checked the propeller blades for nicks, the engine cowlings for oil leaks, the control surfaces for damage. Everything looked nominal. He climbed the ladder into the cockpit and settled into the seat. The P-38 cockpit was cramped but familiar. Bong had spent more than 2,000 hours in this type of aircraft. He knew every switch, every gauge, every quirk of the twin-engine design. The control wheel sat between his knees. The throttle quadrant was on his left, twin levers for the twin engines. The gun sight was mounted directly ahead, a reflector type with illuminated reticle. He ran through the pre-start checklist from memory. Battery switch on, fuel selectors set. Mixture controls to idle cutoff. Prop controls full forward. He primed the left engine, engaged the starter, and watched the propeller begin to turn. The Allison caught on the third blade and roared to life. He repeated the process for the right engine, both engines running smoothly, oil pressure coming up, cylinder head temperatures stable. He released the parking brake and taxied toward the runway. 3 other P-38 seconds followed him. Lieutenant Thomas McGuire was not among them. McGuire was Bong's rival, the second highest scoring American ace with 38 kills. 2 behind Bong. The competition between them had become legend in the 5th Air Force. Both men denied any rivalry, but everyone knew the truth. McGuire wanted that record. McGuire was flying a mission over Mindoro today, 300 miles to the north. Different squadron, different target, different fate. In 10 days, McGuire would be dead, shot down in a dogfight over Los Negros Island while trying to protect a wingman. He would die with 38 kills, 2 short of Bong's record. But on this morning, December 27th, 1944, both men were still alive. Bong taxied onto the runway and pushed his throttles forward. The P-38 accelerated down the pierced steel planking, the distinctive sound of twin engines echoing across the airfield. He lifted off at 110 knots and began climbing toward the morning sun. If you want to see how Bong's incredible journey from a Wisconsin farm boy to America's deadliest fighter pilot unfolded, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Bong. Richard Ira Bong was born on September 24th, 1920, in Superior, Wisconsin. The town sat at the western tip of Lake Superior, 150 miles northeast of Minneapolis. Cold winters, short summers, endless forests. His father, Carl Bong, was a Swedish immigrant who worked as a carpenter. His mother, Dora, raised 9 children in a small house on the edge of town. Dick was the eldest. He learned responsibility early, helping his mother with the younger children, working odd jobs to contribute to the family income. The Depression hit Superior hard. Logging mills closed. Unemployment soared. The Bong family survived through hard work and Swedish stubbornness. Dick discovered aviation at age 8. Charles Lindbergh had crossed the Atlantic the year before, and airplanes were all anyone talked about. Dick built model aircraft from balsa wood and tissue paper. He read every aviation magazine he could find. He spent hours at the Superior Airport, watching biplanes land and take off, dreaming of the sky. He took his first airplane ride at 12, a 15-minute flight in a Barnstormer's Curtiss Jenny. The pilot charged $2 for the ride, a fortune during the Depression. Dick had saved the money from a summer job. He never forgot the sensation of climbing above the trees, seeing his town from 1,000 feet, the world transformed into a map. He knew then what he would become. A pilot. Nothing else mattered. Dick graduated from Superior Central High School in 1938. He enrolled at Superior State Teachers College, planning to become a teacher like his mother wanted. But the civilian pilot training program had just started, a government initiative to build a reserve of trained pilots. Dick signed up immediately. He soloed after 8 hours of instruction. His flight instructor, a former barnstormer named Ray Haas, said Dick was a natural. Perfect coordination, perfect instincts, perfect calm. Most students panicked during their first solo. Dick flew 3 perfect circuits and landed without a bobble. By the time he graduated from college in 1941, Dick had his private pilot's license and 200 hours of flight time. He applied for the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program the day after Pearl Harbor. The medical examination found him in perfect health. The aptitude tests showed exceptional scores. He was accepted immediately. Bong arrived at Rankin Aeronautical Academy in Tulare, California, in January 1942. Primary flight training in Stearman PT-17 biplanes. He excelled. His instructors noted his unusual smoothness on the controls, his natural sense of aircraft attitude and energy state. He never seemed to struggle with any maneuver. In May 1942, Bong received his wings in commission as a second lieutenant. He was assigned to the 49th Fighter Group at Hamilton Field, California. The 49th was converting from P-42s to P-38 Lightnings, the Army Air Force's newest twin-engine fighter. The P-38 was unlike anything Bong had flown before. Twin engines, twin booms, tricycle landing gear. The cockpit sat in a central nacelle between the engine booms, giving the pilot exceptional visibility. The twin engines provided redundancy, lose one engine, and you could still fly home on the other. But the P-38 was also demanding. The counter-rotating propellers eliminated torque, but they also meant losing one engine at low speed could be catastrophic. The aircraft had quirks: compressibility problems in high-speed dives, engine cooling issues in tropical climates, complicated fuel management with multiple tanks. Bong mastered the P-38 inches 2 weeks. His instructors were impressed but also concerned. The young pilot was too aggressive. He flew too close to other aircraft. He pushed the envelope too hard. The incident that almost ended his career happened on June 12, 1942. Bong was flying a training mission over Oakland when he spotted a civilian aircraft below him. Impulse took over. He dove on the aircraft, buzzing it at high speed, then pulled up and rolled away. The civilian pilot reported the incident. It got worse. Bong continued his flight over San Francisco. He flew under the Golden Gate Bridge. He dove on Market Street at low altitude, scattering pedestrians. He circled a woman hanging laundry on a rooftop, the prop wash blowing clothes off the line. The Army Air Forces was not amused. Bong was summoned before Colonel George Churchill, the Hamilton field commander. The charges were serious enough to end a career: reckless flying, endangering civilians, conduct unbecoming an officer. General George Kenney happened to be visiting Hamilton Field that day. Kenney was about to take command of the 5th Air Force in the Southwest Pacific. He needed aggressive pilots who weren't afraid to push limits. He had heard about the incident and asked to meet the young lieutenant. The meeting lasted 10 minutes. Kenney looked at Bong's flight records, his training scores, his aptitude tests. He saw something worth saving. "I understand you've been flying under bridges and chasing ladies," Kenney said. "Yes, sir," Bong admitted. "Can you do that against the Japanese?" "Yes, sir." Kenney smiled. "Then I want you in the Pacific. You're assigned to the 49th Fighter Group. Report in September." The disciplinary charges disappeared. Instead of court-martial, Bong received orders for the Southwest Pacific area. Kenney had personally intervened to save a pilot he believed would become a killer. He wasn't wrong. Bong arrived in Australia in September 1942 and immediately transferred to New Guinea. The 49th Fighter Group was based at Port Moresby, flying defensive patrols against Japanese bombers from Rabaul. The conditions were brutal: tropical heat, torrential rain, malaria, dysentery. The living quarters were tents pitched in mud. The food was sea rations and powdered eggs. The runway was dirt that turned to soup when it rained. The Japanese controlled the skies over New Guinea. Their Zeros were faster, more maneuverable, and flown by experienced pilots who had been fighting since China. American pilots were dying at an alarming rate. The P-40 seconds and early P-38 seconds couldn't match the Zero in a turning fight. But Bong learned quickly. He studied the after-action reports from Midway and the Solomon Islands. He talked to veteran pilots who had fought Zeros and survived. He developed his own tactics. Never turn with a Zero. Never try to outclimb a Zero below 15,000 feet. Never engage at low speed. Use the P-38's superior dive speed and firepower. Attack from altitude. Make one pass and extend. Come back for another pass only if you have the energy advantage. Speed is life. Altitude is insurance. Firepower wins. Bong flew his first combat mission on November 27, 1942. An escort mission for B-25 bombers attacking Leh. No enemy contact. His second mission was the same. And his third. The Japanese weren't flying that week. His first kill came on December 27, 1942, exactly 2 years before his Medal of Honor victory count would reach 40. The 49th Fighter Group was escorting B-24 Liberators to Rabaul, the most heavily defended Japanese base in the South Pacific. Bong was flying at 25,000 feet when he spotted a formation of Zeros climbing to intercept the bombers. He pushed over into a dive. The P-38's airspeed indicator climbed past 400 knots. The Zeros were still climbing, unaware of the attack. Bong picked the trailing aircraft, centered it in his gun sight, and opened fire at 300 yards. The concentrated firepower of 4 machine guns and 1 cannon tore the Zero apart. The engine cowling disintegrated. The fuel tanks exploded. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell away, trailing fire and smoke. First kill. Bong pulled up hard, regaining altitude, looking for more targets. The other Zeros scattered. The escort mission continued without further contact. He returned to base and reported one confirmed kill. The intelligence officer was skeptical. New pilots often claimed kills that couldn't be verified. But Bong's wingman confirmed the victory. Lieutenant Richard West had watched the Zero explode from 500 yards away. Bong had crossed the threshold. He was a killer now. The kills accumulated slowly at first. 2 more in January 1943. 3 in February. Bong was developing his technique, learning the patterns of Japanese pilots, understanding their tactics and weaknesses. The Zero was the best dogfighter in the Pacific, but it had fatal flaws. Weak armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks. The Japanese had traded protection for performance. One good burst from a P-38's guns would often ignite the fuel and destroy the aircraft instantly. Bong learned to aim for the wing roots, where the fuel tanks were located. He learned to attack from above and behind, where the Zero's defensive armament was weakest. He learned patience. Wait for the perfect shot. Don't waste ammunition on low-probability angles. By June 1943, Bong had 11 kills and had become an ace twice over. General Kenny took notice. The general had been right about the young pilot from Wisconsin. Bong was becoming exactly what Kenny needed, a proven fighter pilot who could train others and boost morale. Kenny called Bong to his headquarters in Brisbane. The meeting was casual, 2 men talking over coffee. But the message was serious. "Dick, you're becoming famous," Kenny said. "The newspapers want stories about American heroes. You're going to be one of them." "I'm just doing my job, sir." "That's what all the good ones say. But you're going to do more than your job. You're going to become a symbol. The American people need to know that we're winning this war, that our boys can beat the Japanese in the air. You're going to be proof." Bong understood. He was no longer just a pilot. He was a propaganda tool. The Army Air Forces would use his success to recruit pilots, sell war bonds, maintain home front morale. He would be photographed, interviewed, paraded before crowds. His kill count would be tracked like a baseball player's batting average. He didn't like it, but he accepted it. If his kills could help win the war, he would keep killing. The summer of 1943 was brutal. The 5th Air Force was fighting its way up the coast of New Guinea, supporting ground forces in the Salamaua campaign. The Japanese resisted fiercely. Air battles happened daily. The kill counts of American pilots climbed, but so did the casualty lists. Bong flew constantly. Escort missions, strafing runs, fighter sweeps. By August, he had 18 kills and had become the 2nd highest scoring American pilot in the Southwest Pacific, trailing only Captain Thomas Lynch with 20. Lynch was everything Bong was not: loud, boastful, aggressive in the air and on the ground. He had been fighting since the early days of the war and had developed a reputation as the best fighter pilot in the 5th Air Force. Lynch and Bong developed a friendly rivalry, competing to see who could score more kills. On September 4th, 1943, the 49th Fighter Group launched a major strike against Japanese shipping at Wewak. Bong was leading a flight of 4 P-38 seconds as top cover for the bombers. Lynch was leading another flight attacking ground targets. The Japanese put up heavy resistance. Zeros and Oscars swarmed the American formation. Bong dove into the fight and shot down 2 Zeros in quick succession. Then he spotted a third, climbing to attack a straggling B-25. He pushed over into another dive. The Zero pilot saw him coming and tried to escape in a diving turn. Wrong move. The P-38 was faster in a dive. Bong closed to 200 yards and fired a long burst. The Zero's wing came off at the root, severed by the concentrated firepower. Kill number 21. But the fight wasn't over. Bong pulled up hard and found himself face-to-face with another Zero, head-on, both aircraft closing at a combined speed of 600 knots. He pressed the trigger and held it down. Tracers crossed with tracers. Both aircraft were firing. The Zero exploded 100 yards in front of Bong's P-38. He flew through the debris, pieces of aluminum and fabric striking his windscreen. Something hit his left propeller, chipping the blade. The engine ran rough, but kept producing power. 4 kills in one mission. Bong had tied the Pacific Theater single-mission record. More importantly, he had proven he could survive a head-on engagement, the most dangerous type of aerial combat. He landed at Port Moresby with a damaged propeller and a fuel tank that was nearly empty. Ground crews counted 23 bullet holes in his P-38. One round had passed through the cockpit, 6 inches from his head. He hadn't felt it. Combat does that. You don't notice the near misses until afterward. By October 1943, Bong had 26 kills and was closing on Captain Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26. The newspapers tracked his progress obsessively. Every kill was front-page news. The farm boy from Wisconsin was becoming a national celebrity. Rickenbacker himself sent Bong a telegram. "Just want you to know I'm all for you. Keep shooting them down." On November 5th, 1943, Bong tied Rickenbacker's record. He shot down a Japanese Ki-61 Tony fighter over Rabaul during a bomber escort mission, 26 kills. Tied with the greatest American ace of World War I. The next day, Bong broke the record. He was flying a fighter sweep over Rabaul when he encountered a formation of Zeros escorting Betty bombers. He attacked the lead Zero, destroyed it with a deflection shot from 300 yards, and immediately engaged a second. Kill number 27. America's ace of aces. The newspapers went wild. Bong's face appeared on covers across the country. He received hundreds of letters from admirers, many of them young women. Hollywood wanted to make a movie about him. Politicians wanted to parade him through their districts. General Kenny had a different idea. He ordered Bong back to the United States for a war bond tour and a mandatory rest period. Bong had been in continuous combat for 14 months. He was exhausted, though he wouldn't admit it. The stress of daily missions was wearing him down. Bong protested, but obeyed. He flew home in December 1943, arriving in Superior, Wisconsin to a hero's welcome. The entire town turned out. The governor was there. The high school band played. His mother cried. For 3 months, Bong traveled the country. He spoke at war bond rallies. He visited aircraft factories. He met with flight training cadets. He smiled for photographs and gave interviews until he was sick of hearing his own voice. And he met a girl. Her name was Marjorie Vattendahl. She was a student at Superior State Teachers College, the same school Bong had attended. They met at a college dance in January 1944. Marge was beautiful, intelligent, and completely unimpressed by his fame. "I don't care how many planes you've shot down," she told him. "That doesn't make you special." It was exactly what Bong needed to hear. Everyone else treated him like a hero. Marge treated him like a human being. They began dating. Bong extended his stateside tour as long as possible, finding excuses to stay near Superior. He took Marge flying in a borrowed aircraft, showing her aerobatics, teaching her the basics of flight. She was terrified at first, then exhilarated. By March 1944, they were engaged. Bong gave her a diamond ring he had purchased with his combat pay. They planned a wedding for when the war was over. Both of them believed he would survive. Neither mentioned the alternative. General Kenny called in April. The war couldn't wait any longer. Bong was needed back in the Pacific. The 5th Air Force was preparing for the invasion of the Philippines. They needed their best pilot. Bong said goodbye to Marge at the Superior train station. He promised he would come back. He promised they would be married. He kissed her and walked away without looking back. He returned to New Guinea on April 12, 1944. The war had changed in his absence. The Japanese were retreating across the Pacific. American forces had captured the Marshall Islands. The offensive against Truk had neutralized the great Japanese naval base. The Japanese Empire was contracting, but it was fighting desperately for every inch of territory. Bong's return to combat was immediate. The 5th Air Force was attacking Hollandia, the major Japanese base on the northern coast of New Guinea. The operation would cut off 50,000 Japanese troops and open the way for the invasion of the Philippines. On April 12th, Bong's first day back, he shot down 3 Japanese fighters over Hollandia. Kills 28, 29, and 30. He had been away for 4 months, but his skills were undiminished. If anything, the rest had sharpened him. The next 2 months were the most productive of Bong's career. He flew almost daily, racking up kills at an unprecedented rate. By the end of June, he had 40 confirmed victories, 14 more than Rickenbacker's record. He was averaging nearly 1 kill per mission. The secret was his technique. Bong had refined his tactics to near perfection. He always attacked from altitude. He always maintained speed advantage. He never turned with the enemy. He fired at close range, ensuring hits. He used deflection shooting, leading his targets, hitting them before they knew he was there. His gunnery had improved dramatically since training. Hours of practice, thousands of rounds fired at towed targets, and the intense feedback of actual combat had transformed him from an average shooter to a deadly marksman. He could hit a maneuvering target at 400 yards, an almost impossible shot for most pilots. But he was also lucky. Bullet holes appeared in his P-38 after almost every mission. Rounds passed through the cockpit. Shrapnel struck his armor plate. 1-0 exploded so close to his aircraft that burning debris scorched his paint. He should have been killed a dozen times. "I don't fight for kills," he explained to a reporter. "I fight to come home." October 1944 brought the invasion of the Philippines and the largest naval battle in modern history. Bong flew constantly, supporting the Leyte landings, attacking Japanese aircraft, and shipping throughout the archipelago. On October 10th, he shot down 2 Japanese aircraft over Formosa. On October 15th, he destroyed 3 more over Leyte. On October 28th, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, he downed 4 Japanese fighters in a single mission, bringing his total to 40. 40 confirmed kills. The number was staggering. No American pilot had ever approached such a total. The previous record holder, Rickenbacker, had 26. Bong had nearly doubled it. General Douglas MacArthur personally presented Bong with the Medal of Honor on December 12, 1944, at Tacloban Airfield. The ceremony was brief but significant. MacArthur praised Bong's courage, skill, and dedication. Major Bong's conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action, above and beyond the call of duty, reflect highest credit upon himself and the armed forces of the United States, the citation read. Bong stood at attention while MacArthur pinned the medal to his chest. Photographers captured the moment. The image would appear in newspapers across America, the ace of aces, receiving the nation's highest honor from the Pacific Theater commander. But Kenny was worried. He had seen too many high-scoring aces die. The Japanese were becoming increasingly desperate. They were introducing new tactics, kamikaze attacks, mass formations, suicide ramming. The air over the Philippines was more dangerous than ever. Kenny issued an order. Bong was prohibited from flying combat missions. He would remain in the Philippines as an instructor and advisor. When transportation was available, he would return to the United States. Bong protested. He wanted to keep fighting. His squadron needed him. The war wasn't over. Kenny overruled him. "You've done enough, Dick. Let someone else have a turn." Bong flew home on January 2nd, 1945. He arrived in San Francisco on January 8th. Marge was waiting at the airport. They embraced in front of photographers. The hero and his sweetheart reunited. The war in the Pacific would continue for another 7 months. Other pilots would keep fighting, keep dying, keep scoring kills. McGuire would die on January 7th, shot down over Los Negros Island with 38 confirmed victories. He would receive the Medal of Honor posthumously. But Richard Bong's combat career was over. 40 confirmed kills, the highest score any American pilot would ever achieve. The record would stand forever. Bong and Marge married on February 10th, 1945 inches, Superior, Wisconsin. The wedding was a national event. Photographers from every major newspaper attended. Newsreel cameras recorded the ceremony. The ace of aces was taking a wife. For the next 6 months, Bong was assigned to stateside duty. He flew demonstration flights. He tested new aircraft. He trained pilots at various bases across the country. He waited for the war to end. In May 1945, he received a new assignment. Lockheed Aircraft was developing the P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. The Army Air Forces needed experienced test pilots to evaluate the aircraft. Bong was selected. The P-80 was unlike anything he had flown. No propeller. A jet engine mounted in the fuselage provided thrust. Maximum speed over 500 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour faster than any propeller-driven fighter. The future of aviation. Bong reported to Lockheed's Burbank facility in June 1945. He spent weeks learning the P-80's systems, studying the engineering, understanding the peculiarities of jet propulsion. The aircraft was temperamental. The early jet engines were unreliable. Several test pilots had been killed in P-80 accidents. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The war was ending. Bong had survived. One more flight remained. August 6, 1945. The morning was clear and warm in Burbank, California. Bong arrived at Lockheed's test facility at 0700. He was scheduled for a routine test flight in a P-80A1LO, serial number 44-8, 5048. The aircraft had been experiencing fuel system problems, and the engineers wanted him to evaluate the fixes. Bong suited up in the pilot's locker room. Flight suit, parachute, helmet. The same routine he had followed for thousands of flights. He walked to the aircraft, conducted his pre-flight inspection, and climbed into the cockpit. The P-80's cockpit was cramped but modern. Jet engine instruments replaced the familiar propeller controls. The throttle was a single lever, no mixture, no prop pitch to manage. Bong started the engine and taxied to the runway. Tower cleared him for takeoff. He pushed the throttle forward. The Allison J-33 turbojet wound up to full power, the distinctive whine replacing the familiar roar of piston engines. The P-80 accelerated down the runway. At 120 knots, Bong pulled back on the stick. The aircraft lifted cleanly into the morning air. He climbed to 5,000 feet over the San Fernando Valley. The engine was running smoothly. All instruments were in the normal range. He began a series of test maneuvers, turns, climbs, dives, checking the fuel system under various load conditions. Something happened at 1,500 feet during his approach. The engine flamed out. Loss of fuel pressure, the same problem the engineers thought they had fixed. The J-33 turbojet fell silent. A P-38 could glide for miles on a dead engine. The P-80 was different. Higher wing loading, smaller wings, steeper glide angle. Without power, the aircraft dropped like a stone. Bong had seconds to react. He could try to restart the engine, but there wasn't enough altitude. He could try to stretch the glide to the runway, but the math was impossible. He could eject. The P-80's ejection system was primitive by later standards. The pilot had to manually separate from the aircraft before pulling the ripcord. The process took valuable seconds Bong didn't have. He pulled the canopy jettison handle. The canopy flew off. He released his seatbelt and pushed himself up, out of the cockpit, into the slipstream. He was too low. The aircraft was falling too fast. He cleared the cockpit but didn't have enough altitude for his parachute to fully deploy. The P-80 hit the ground in a residential neighborhood near Oxnard Boulevard. It exploded on impact, throwing debris across several blocks. Miraculously, no civilians were killed. Richard Bong hit the ground moments later. His parachute had deployed but hadn't inflated fully. The impact was fatal. He was 24 years old. The news spread across the country within hours. The ace of aces was dead, not in combat over the Pacific, not fighting the Japanese he had spent 3 years destroying. In a test flight accident over California. On the same day, the atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. Marge learned of her husband's death from a telegram. She was visiting family in Superior, waiting for Dick to join her when his test program was complete. They had been married for 6 months. The funeral was held on August 12, 1,945 inches superior. Thousands attended. Military honor guards lined the streets. General Kenny flew in from the Pacific to serve as a pallbearer. The governor of Wisconsin gave the eulogy. Richard Bong was buried in Poplar Cemetery, near his childhood home. The headstone was simple: his name, his dates, his rank. Marge never remarried. She kept Dick's letters, his photographs, his medals. She spent the rest of her life preserving his memory, speaking at veterans' events. She died in 2003, at the age of 80. The legacy of Richard Bong extends beyond his 40 kills. He developed and refined tactics that became standard doctrine for American fighter pilots. He proved that aggression tempered with discipline could achieve extraordinary results. He demonstrated that a farm boy from Wisconsin could become the deadliest fighter pilot in American history. His record stands unbroken. No American pilot since has achieved 40 aerial victories. The nature of aerial combat has changed. Missiles have replaced guns. Radar has replaced visual contact. Technological superiority has replaced individual skill as the decisive factor. There will never be another Richard Bong. The P-80 that killed him was redesigned. The fuel system problems were corrected. The ejection seat was improved. Lessons learned from Bong's death saved other pilots' lives. General George Kenny wrote about Bong after the war. He was the best fighter pilot I ever knew. Not the most aggressive. McGuire was more aggressive. Not the best shot. Others were better marksmen. But Dick Bong had something special. He understood combat. He understood himself. He knew his limits and never exceeded them. Until that last day, when the limits weren't his to set. The mathematics of Bong's career are staggering. He flew 212 combat missions over 22 months. He achieved 40 confirmed kills and probably a dozen more that were never verified. His kill ratio was roughly 1 victory per 5 missions, an almost unprecedented rate of success. He was not the flashiest pilot. He was not the most aggressive. He did not seek glory or fame. He simply did his job, day after day, mission after mission, kill after kill. He survived through skill and caution and luck, until luck ran out over California on a sunny August morning. Richard Ira Bong. The 24th of September 1920. The 6th of August 1945. America's ace of aces. Gone but not forgotten. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do us a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about pilots who became legends through skill, courage, and sacrifice. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Major Richard Bong doesn't disappear into silence.